Okay guys, let's go ahead and talk about density. So take a second looking at these pictures, and I just want you to think to yourself, which one is the most dense? So if you were thinking the one on the right, the green one, letter C was, then you would be correct. So what about this picture? Which one would be the most dense? And again, if you're thinking the one on the right, then you are also correct. So yay, good job. So most people probably think the one, the top letter C is the most dense because it's sunk to the bottom. So a lot of times when we think density, we think about weight, and people will reason that this is the most dense because it did sink to the bottom. And they'll think this one is the most dense because there are more green circles within the box. And that is actually correct for both of those. But let's go ahead and take a look at what density actually is so we can really understand those two pictures. So density is how much stuff is in a unit of space. And when we're talking about stuff, we're talking about matter. Matter is anything that has a mass and takes up space. So all atoms are matter. You are matter. Your desk is matter. It has a mass and it's taking up space within the room. So when we look at density, we're simply comparing the mass to the volume. And you can also see that within the formula here. Now this formula is going to be very important. You do need to know it. So density is mass divided by volume, or you could think of it as mass per volume. How much stuff, which is the mass, per unit of space, which is volume. The unit for mass is grams per milliliter or gram per centimeter cubed. And this should make sense to you when you look at the formula. Because the formula is mass divided by volume, the unit is a mass unit over a volume unit. A mass unit over a volume unit. So the formula mass divided by volume, it explains the definition as well as the units. Now, a lot of you, when we first asked, what do you think of when you first hear density? You may have said a density column, which is what this picture down here is. We are not going to make density columns, although they are very neat, but I'm sure a lot of you made them in middle school. If not, you could go home and try to do it yourself. But looking at this density column, we know honey is the most dense because it sinks, and if something's more dense, it will sink to the bottom. If it's less dense, it will float to the top. So of all of these liquids, lamp oil was the least dense. Now another neat thing you can do is drop solids within a density column. So you have a screw, you have a cherry tomato, you can't see it, but there's a dice right there, and a ping pong ball. So when you drop a solid object into liquids like that, they're going to sink down until they hit something that has an equal density as them, and then they're going to be happy to stay there. So the screw is the most dense, and it was more dense than honey, which is why it sunk all the way to the bottom. And the ping pong ball is the least dense of everything, which is why it stayed at the very, very top. Now, if you were to mix all these up to stir it, then they would mix, but if you let it sit long enough over time, the different columns would actually separate themselves back out. Now, the food coloring might not, but the columns would, because things of different densities, they're happier when they are separated. So that is density. Mass divided by volume. Okay, moving right along. Let's compare this to what we see. So we know that the most dense things sink, which then therefore explains why the green thing was the most dense. And we know that density is how much stuff in an area of space. So these two cubes have the same unit of space because they are the same size. The one over here has more stuff in it, and so therefore it is the most dense. So that's just bringing into light that picture we looked at earlier. So now I want you in just a second to pause this video to give you time to do this. But if you recall, the formula for density is density equals mass divided by volume. So I want you to pause this video and on your own, by yourself, solve for mass or solve for volume. So I want you to find the formula for mass, solving for M, and then I want you to find the volume or the formula for volume, solving for V. Okay, so let's take a look at this. This will be more difficult for you depending on how good your basic algebra skills are, but we all need a little math review, and this is the only math I can really do. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So you have density equals mass divided by volume. Well, if I'm solving for mass, the first thing I want to do is get rid of this fraction, because I hate fractions because they confuse me. So the best way to get rid of my fraction is to multiply both sides by volume. If I multiply both sides by volume, then this volume cancels out that denominator, and I distribute this one in. So what I'm left with is dV equals m. So the formula for mass is density times volume. Now let's solve for volume. So again, I have density equals mass divided by volume. I want to get rid of my my fraction because I hate them, so I'm going to do the same thing, cancel it out. So dV equals m. To get V by itself, I simply divide both sides by d. So volume equals mass divided by density. So there's your formula for volume. Now, for those of you who absolutely hated this and you're like, I'm not in math class, this is earth science, don't worry, I have an easier way, but I wanted to put you through that struggle for just a moment. Plus, it's a good refresher of math. So if you didn't get the formulas, that's fine. I'm going to show them to you again. This is what we call the density triangle, okay? Right now, you can ignore this problem, so just ignore that. For now, we'll come back to it. This is your density triangle. I want everybody to draw this triangle in their notes, okay? Everybody draw the triangle in their notes. You have to set the triangle up like this. Remember, density equals mass divided by volume. That's why I have density down here and then mass over volume over here. So you have to set the triangle up like this or it will not work. And if you don't set it up like that, then you will end up just messing up all your formulas and you have to solve it back the algebraic way. So let's take a look at it. Again, ignoring the word problem. So if I'm going to find the formula for density, then I'm going to cover with my finger or my hand, I'm going to cover up D. So I'm going to cover that up and I'm just going to ignore it. And that will leave me with the formula, mass divided by volume. Well, let's do that again. Let's look for the formula for mass. Well, to find the formula for mass using my triangle, I simply cover up the M. I cover that up, and what I'm left with is the formula for mass. So mass equals density times volume. So again, I can do this with volume. I can cover up V. So when I cover that, I'm left with volume equals mass divided by density. So those are my formulas. So in case you didn't have a chance to write them down, density is mass over volume. Mass is, again, if you cover up M, what you're left with is density times volume, and then volume is mass divided by density. And so if you use this density triangle, you don't have to do any algebra to figure out any formula. All you have to do is remember what the triangle is, cover up one letter, and it leaves you with the formula to solve for that particular letter. So now that we have gone over the triangle, I want you to now solve the word problem. Okay, so let's look. You have a rock that has a volume of 30 centimeters cubed, so I'm going to do volume equals 30. A density of 590, so density equals 590. What is the mass? So mass equals my question mark. Well, if I'm looking for mass, again, to use my triangle, I cover up M, and the formula I'm left with is mass equals density times volume. So now all I have to do is fill in the numbers. So mass equals 30 times 590. And I don't know that off the top of my head, so 30 times 590 equals 17700. So that is my mass. The unit for mass is grams. So that would be how you solve this problem. So I use my triangle to find my formula, and then I just plug the numbers into the formula. Now I highly recommend writing down all of your numbers like I did up here with the variables. That will keep you from doing those stupid mistakes that a lot of us tend to do in math. I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen. and let's move on. So the next thing you're going to do is go to Canvas. When you go to Canvas, you'll click on the Earth and Environmental Science section, which is our class, obviously, and there will be something in there called Density Problems.